The courtroom had heard arguments, yelling, and chaos before, but nothing prepared anyone for the insult Karen hurled that afternoon. She wasn't the typical loud defendant trying to win attention. Karen carried herself like someone who believed every room belonged to her the second she entered it. Her confidence was oversized, her attitude even bigger, and she treated confrontation like a sport she always expected to win. But the atmosphere shifted the instant she leaned across the table, curled her lip into a smug grin, and mocked Judge Judy by calling her a skinny witch in front of the entire courtroom. Before we get deeper into this unbelievable courtroom showdown, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, because I love seeing viewers tuning in from around the world. And make sure you subscribe so you never miss these jaw-dropping courtroom moments. Trust me, this case only gets crazier from here. What Karen said wasn't simply rude. It felt like an open challenge thrown directly at Judge Judy's authority. A stunned reaction swept across the courtroom immediately afterward. The audience froze. Even the camera crew looked shaken as the lenses zoomed toward Judy's face, catching the slight narrowing of her eyes. Everyone knew Judge Judy's reputation. For years, she had dealt with every kind of difficult personality imaginable. Liars, scammers, manipulators, screamers, and arrogant people had all walked into her courtroom thinking they could overpower her. Yet very few had ever crossed the line the way Karen just had. Insulting Judge Judy personally, right to her face, inside her own courtroom, felt almost unbelievable. But this is where the situation became dangerous for Karen, because Judge Judy didn't react immediately. She stayed completely still and allowed the insult to linger in the room. The silence became suffocating. Karen mistook that pause for weakness. She thought she had gained control of the courtroom. She believed her insult had shaken Judy. What Karen failed to understand was that Judy's silence was intentional. It wasn't hesitation. It was strategy. Judy knew exactly what she was doing. She was letting the tension build while Karen sat there, feeling victorious for a few extra seconds. The people watching could sense it immediately. The audience leaned forward in anticipation because everyone knew what usually happened when Judge Judy paused like that. A verbal strike was coming. And when Judy finally responded, it was never small. But Judy's upcoming response wasn't just about defending herself. That wasn't the real point anymore. Karen had accidentally created something much bigger. Judy was preparing to expose Karen's arrogance, entitlement, and disrespect in front of everyone watching. Karen believed her insult had embarrassed Judy. In reality, she had handed Judy the perfect opportunity to dismantle her publicly. The words Karen threw out were about to become the very thing that turned the entire courtroom against her, and that's why this moment carried so much weight. It wasn't simply two women arguing. It became a battle over authority, respect, and control. Karen thought being louder made her stronger. She assumed intimidation worked on everyone, but she forgot one very important fact. Judge Judy never loses command of her courtroom, not to aggressive people, not to manipulators, and definitely not to someone arrogant enough to believe insults could overpower authority. Before I tell you exactly how Judy destroyed Karen's confidence with one brutal comeback, make sure you hit the like button, because what happened next stunned everyone in that courtroom. Respect. That was the real issue hanging over the courtroom after Karen's insult echoed through the air. To some people, it may have looked like another loud argument between two stubborn women. But to everyone inside that room, it represented something far more serious. Judge Judy wasn't just another person sitting behind the bench. She represented order, discipline, authority. For decades, her courtroom had operated because people understood one thing. Judy controlled the room completely. Her sharp words, fast thinking, and fearless attitude had built an image stronger than almost any television judge in history. Defendants who walked in confident usually walked out embarrassed because Judy always stayed one step ahead. Karen, however, didn't view Judy as someone deserving respect. She saw her as a target. In Karen's mind, if she could insult Judy loudly enough, she could weaken her authority in front of everyone. That was the real danger of the moment. If Judy ignored the insult completely, Karen would appear victorious. The courtroom would remember silence instead of strength. Clips would spread online showing Judge Judy getting insulted without responding. The entire balance of authority inside that room would crack. But if Judy answered correctly, Karen wouldn't just lose the argument. She would become an example. That's why the tension became so intense. Judy understood exactly what was at stake. She knew her response had to do more than insult Karen back. It had to remind everyone watching why Judge Judy's authority had lasted for decades. Meanwhile, Karen sat there smiling wider with every second of silence. Her confidence grew because she believed Judy had nothing to say. But Judy's silence wasn't surrender, it was pressure. Every second made the room more uncomfortable. Every pause increased anticipation. Every quiet moment pushed Karen closer to the disaster she couldn't yet see coming. And underneath all her arrogance, Karen slowly began feeling it too. Her eyes shifted nervously. Her posture stiffened slightly. Even beneath the smug expression, a small part of her realized she might have made a terrible mistake, because deep down, she understood something the audience already knew. Judge Judy was preparing to strike back. Karen had spent most of her life overpowering people through sheer force of personality. Everywhere she went, conflict followed behind her like a shadow. Restaurant workers remembered her because of the scenes she created over tiny mistakes. Cashiers dreaded seeing her approach their register because they knew an argument was coming before she even opened her mouth. Neighbors avoided eye contact whenever she walked outside because one complaint could quickly turn into a screaming match. For Karen, intimidation was a habit. She had learned long ago that if she spoke loudly enough, acted aggressively enough, and embarrassed people publicly, most would eventually back down just to avoid dealing with her. That strategy became her identity. She mistook bullying for strength and disrespect for confidence. And for years, it worked. People gave her what she wanted simply because they were exhausted by her behavior. But Judge Judy was different from everyone Karen had ever pushed around before. Judy wasn't a nervous employee trying to keep a customer happy. She wasn't a frightened neighbor avoiding drama. She wasn't someone who feared confrontation. Judge Judy had built an entire career confronting people exactly like Karen. That's why Karen's insult wasn't landing the way she expected. While Karen sat there believing she controlled the room, Judy remained perfectly calm. That calmness was far more intimidating than shouting ever could have been. Judge Judy understood something Karen never learned. Real authority doesn't need to scream. It doesn't panic. It doesn't react emotionally. And it definitely doesn't lose control because someone throws an insult. True authority waits patiently, chooses the perfect moment, and then ends the argument completely. That was exactly what Judy was preparing to do. Karen still couldn't see it yet. She kept leaning back confidently in her chair, convinced she had embarrassed one of America's most respected television judges in front of the entire courtroom. But everyone else could already feel the shift happening. The audience exchanged glances. The bailiff stood motionless. Even the camera crew seemed frozen in anticipation. The room no longer felt like a normal courtroom hearing. It felt like the seconds before a storm finally breaks. Judge Judy slowly adjusted herself in her chair, her expression unreadable. She wasn't angry in the way Karen expected. If anything, she looked almost amused. That expression alone began shaking Karen's confidence. Because people who truly lose control don't stay calm like that. Judy's eyes stayed locked directly on Karen, steady and sharp. The silence stretched so long that even Karen's grin started weakening around the edges. Then Judy finally spoke. Her voice wasn't loud. That made it even more powerful. "Skinny?" Judy repeated calmly, tilting her head slightly. The courtroom became completely still. "Thank you," she said dryly. That may be the first truthful thing said in this courtroom today. The reaction exploded instantly. Laughter burst from the audience. Even people trying to remain professional struggled not to react. Karen's smile disappeared immediately. But Judy wasn't finished. Not even close. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving Karen's face. "But let me explain something to you," Judy continued calmly. "You don't walk into my courtroom and reduce people to insults simply because you lack the discipline to behave like an adult." The laughter stopped instantly. Now the room was hanging on every word. "You think being loud makes you powerful," Judy said. "You think insulting people makes you intimidating, but all you've really done today is expose exactly who you are." Karen shifted uncomfortably in her chair. For the first time since entering the courtroom, she no longer looked confident. She looked nervous. Judy continued without raising her voice once. "People who are truly strong don't need to scream at cashiers. They don't bully strangers. They don't insult judges because they're losing control of an argument." The room stayed silent. Karen opened her mouth as if she wanted to interrupt. But Judy immediately cut her off with one sharp glance. "No," Judy said firmly. "You've spoken enough already." That sentence landed harder than shouting ever could. Karen froze again. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, completely composed, while Karen sat there visibly unraveling under the pressure. "You walked in here believing your attitude would scare everyone around you," Judy continued. "But the problem with people like you is that you mistake chaos for strength." Karen's face flushed red. The audience could practically see the embarrassment spreading across her expression in real time. "And another thing," Judy added sharply, "if your only response during conflict is insults, then you've already admitted you have no real argument left." A few quiet laughs spread through the courtroom again. Karen looked around desperately now, realizing the crowd that once watched silently was no longer on her side. They were watching her collapse. That realization hit her harder than Judy's words themselves. For years, Karen had controlled situations by making other people uncomfortable. Now she was the uncomfortable one, and Judy knew it. That's why she stayed perfectly calm the entire time. She understood the psychological shift happening right in front of everyone. Karen's power only worked when people feared confrontation. Judge Judy didn't fear her at all. In fact, Judy looked completely in control, while Karen looked smaller with every passing second. The balance of the courtroom had fully changed now. Karen wasn't dominating the room anymore. She was trapped inside it. And Judy still hadn't delivered her hardest line yet. Everyone watching could sense another blow coming. The tension returned instantly as Judy folded her hands together and stared directly at Karen again. Then came the sentence that completely shattered whatever confidence Karen still had left. "You're so busy trying to embarrass everyone around you," Judy said coldly, "that you never realized how embarrassing your own behavior actually is." The courtroom erupted again. Karen's face burned bright red. Her confidence cracked completely. For the first time all day, she had absolutely nothing to say back. And the worst part for Karen wasn't even the insult itself. It was the fact that Judge Judy never lost control while delivering it. Every word came calmly, precisely, deliberately. Which made the humiliation even more devastating. Karen had entered the courtroom believing volume and aggression gave her power. Judge Judy was now proving in front of everyone that discipline and composure were far stronger weapons, and Karen was losing badly. The atmosphere inside the courtroom had completely changed now. Only minutes earlier, Karen had walked in carrying herself like the loudest and most powerful person in the room. But after Judge Judy's calm dismantling of her attitude, the confidence that once fueled Karen's insults was beginning to collapse right in front of everyone watching. Karen tried desperately not to show it. She crossed her arms tighter, shifted in her chair, rolled her eyes dramatically, as though none of Judy's words had affected her. But the performance wasn't convincing anymore. The audience could see the truth clearly now. Karen was rattled. And Judge Judy knew it too. That was the thing about Judy. After decades in courtrooms, she had developed an almost surgical ability to recognize the exact moment someone lost emotional control. She knew when arrogance turned into panic. She knew when confidence became insecurity hiding behind anger. Karen had officially reached that point. Still, Karen wasn't ready to surrender publicly. People like her rarely backed down gracefully. Instead, they became louder when cornered because volume was the only weapon they had left. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Karen snapped suddenly, forcing out a bitter laugh. "Everybody here just worships you because you're on television." The audience groaned quietly. Karen thought she was recovering. In reality, she was digging herself deeper. Judge Judy didn't even blink. "That's your problem," Judy replied calmly. "You think respect comes from television. It doesn't." Her tone stayed perfectly measured. Respect comes from how people carry themselves. And right now, you're demonstrating exactly why you struggle to receive any. Another wave of murmurs spread across the courtroom. Karen's jaw tightened instantly. The words hit hard because deep down, she knew they were true. People tolerated her, they avoided her, they gave in to her arguments simply to escape conflict. But very few actually respected her. Judge Judy had exposed that reality publicly in only a few sentences. Karen tried interrupting again, raising her voice higher this time. "You don't know anything about me!" "Oh, I know enough," Judy cut in sharply. The interruption was immediate and precise. "I know that mature adults don't walk into courtrooms throwing playground insults because they can't control their emotions." Karen's face twisted with frustration. "You're twisting everything." "No," Judy answered calmly. "I'm clarifying everything." That line landed like a hammer. The audience reacted instantly again, because that was Judy's gift. She didn't just argue better than people. She reframed the entire situation until the other person's own behavior became evidence against them. Karen's insults no longer looked powerful. Now they looked childish, desperate, embarrassing. Judge Judy leaned slightly forward again, maintaining total control of the room without needing to raise her voice once. "You know what the difference is between confidence and intimidation?" Judy asked calmly. Karen stayed silent. "Confidence doesn't need to bully people," Judy answered herself. "Confidence doesn't scream over workers, insult strangers, or attack people personally because it can't handle disagreement." Karen looked furious now, but underneath the anger, panic was starting to appear because every sentence Judy delivered was stripping away the image Karen tried so hard to maintain. For years, Karen probably convinced herself she was strong because people backed down around her. But Judge Judy was exposing the truth. People didn't back down because Karen was powerful. They backed down because dealing with her was exhausting. That realization was humiliating, and the entire courtroom could see it happening in real time. Karen attempted another sarcastic laugh, but it sounded weaker now. "You think you've got me all figured out?" Judge Judy tilted her head slightly. "No," Judy replied calmly. "I figured you out the second you confused disrespect with strength." The silence afterward hit harder than shouting ever could. Karen stared at Judy, completely speechless for a moment, and Judy kept going. "People who truly value themselves don't spend their lives trying to humiliate others," she continued. "Usually, the loudest person in the room is the one fighting hardest to hide insecurity." That line visibly shook Karen. Even the audience reacted differently this time. The laughter faded. Now, people were simply watching Karen unravel, because Judy wasn't only insulting her anymore, she was dissecting her psychologically. Karen's breathing became heavier. Her posture changed again. The smugness she entered with had almost completely disappeared now. Judge Judy noticed every detail. "That attitude might work outside this courtroom," Judy said calmly, "but in here facts matter more than tantrums." Karen suddenly slammed her hand against the table. "This is ridiculous." "No," Judy replied immediately. "What's ridiculous is a grown adult thinking public disrespect somehow makes them look intelligent." The audience burst out laughing again. Karen looked around helplessly now, and that was the worst part for her. The room she thought she controlled had fully turned against her. Every glare, every whisper, every laugh, it all felt directed straight at her. Karen had spent years making other people feel small. Now she was finally experiencing that feeling herself, and Judge Judy never once lost composure while delivering it. That calmness made everything worse. Karen wanted shouting. She wanted chaos. She wanted emotional reactions she could fight against, but Judy denied her all of that. Instead, Judy used patience, timing, and precision like weapons, which made Karen feel even more powerless. The courtroom no longer saw Karen as intimidating. Now they saw someone spiraling publicly after underestimating the wrong person. Judge Judy folded her hands together again and delivered another devastating line. "You came in here believing your attitude gave you authority," Judy said. "But authority without discipline is just noise." The room fell silent instantly. That sentence hit everyone. Because it wasn't just about Karen anymore. It sounded like a lesson. A warning. Karen looked completely defeated now, though she was still too stubborn to admit it openly. Her eyes dropped for a split second before she quickly looked back up again. Judge Judy noticed that too. And in that moment, Judy realized the fight was basically over. Karen simply hadn't accepted it yet. But Judy wasn't finished, not quite, because one final humiliation still waited around the corner, and it would become the moment everyone remembered most. By now, the courtroom no longer felt like a legal hearing. It felt like the slow collapse of someone who had spent her entire life believing intimidation could overpower accountability. Karen still sat there, trying to hold on to whatever confidence she had left, but everyone could see the truth written across her face. She was losing badly. The smug grin that once stretched across her face had disappeared completely. In its place was tension, frustration, and growing embarrassment. Her shoulders stiffened every time the audience reacted to Judy's words, and each quiet laugh from the gallery seemed to hit her harder than the last. Judge Judy, meanwhile, looked completely untouched by the chaos. That contrast made the humiliation even worse. Karen looked emotional. Judy looked composed. Karen looked desperate. Judy looked in control. And the audience noticed every second of it. Still unwilling to admit defeat, Karen made one final attempt to recover. "You think humiliating people makes you powerful?" she snapped bitterly. "That's all this is. You embarrass people for entertainment." A few people in the audience exchanged looks. Karen probably believed she had finally found an argument strong enough to shake Judy. But Judy answered instantly. "No," she replied calmly. "People embarrass themselves. I simply refuse to pretend otherwise." The room erupted again. Karen's face tightened immediately. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "You walked in here insulting people instead of controlling yourself," Judy continued. "And now you're upset because everyone can see the consequences of your own behavior." Karen opened her mouth to interrupt. Judy raised a finger. "Don't," she said firmly. Karen froze again. That one word carried more authority than shouting ever could. Judge Judy's tone became colder now, more direct. "You know what your real problem is?" Judy asked calmly. "You confuse fear with respect." The sentence hit Karen immediately. You think people respect you because they stay quiet around you. But they aren't respecting you. They're avoiding you. The courtroom became silent again. Karen looked completely stunned. For the first time all day, her confidence looked genuinely broken. Judge Judy continued carefully, each sentence landing harder than the one before. "People walk away from behavior like yours because it's exhausting," Judy said. "Not because it's impressive." Karen's breathing became shaky. She tried forcing another sarcastic smile, but it collapsed halfway across her face, and Judy noticed. "You came in here believing cruelty made you strong," Judy continued. "But cruelty is usually the easiest mask for weakness." That line cut deeper than everything before it. Even the audience stopped reacting loudly now. People were simply watching Karen unravel piece by piece under the pressure of someone who understood her completely. Karen finally tried defending herself again. "You don't know what I've been through." Judge Judy nodded once. "You're right," she answered calmly. "I don't. and neither does anyone else in this courtroom. Karen looked momentarily confused by the response. But hardship, Judy continued sharply, does not give you permission to treat people badly. The silence afterward felt heavy because everyone knew Judy was right. Plenty of people struggle in life. Plenty of people feel frustrated or angry. But most don't weaponize that pain against strangers the way Karen clearly had. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, maintaining complete calm while Karen looked more emotionally unstable by the second. That's the difference between maturity and immaturity, Judy said. Adults take responsibility for their behavior. Children blame everyone else for it. Karen's eyes widened angrily. I am not a child. Then stop acting like one, Judy replied immediately. The audience exploded again. Karen looked completely cornered now. Every attempt to recover only created another opening for Judy to expose her further. And Karen finally realized something horrifying. Nothing she said was working anymore. The louder she became, the worse she looked. Meanwhile, Judy barely raised her voice once and still controlled every inch of the room. That realization crushed Karen psychologically because her entire identity depended on overpowering people emotionally. And Judge Judy simply refused to be emotionally overpowered. The courtroom energy shifted completely now. At the beginning of the hearing, people watched Karen cautiously. Now they watched Judy with admiration. Every sentence Judy delivered reinforced exactly why she had spent decades dominating courtrooms and television screens alike, not because she was loud, but because she understood people. She understood arrogance, manipulation, entitlement, excuses, and she knew exactly how to dismantle all of them calmly. Karen suddenly pushed her chair back, slightly, visibly overwhelmed. The movement drew attention immediately. Judge Judy noticed too. You're uncomfortable now, Judy asked calmly. Karen stayed silent. Good, Judy answered. Maybe for the first time in your life, you're experiencing how everyone else feels around you. That line completely shattered whatever confidence Karen still had remaining. Her face turned bright red again. She looked down briefly, avoiding eye contact for the first time all day. The audience saw it instantly. Karen was defeated, not legally, psychologically. Judge Judy had completely reversed the power dynamic. Karen entered believing she was the dominant force in the room. Now she couldn't even maintain eye contact. And Judy still had one final blow waiting, the kind of line that would follow Karen long after she left the courtroom. The room became perfectly quiet again as Judy adjusted her glasses one last time and stared directly at Karen. Then she delivered the sentence nobody in that courtroom would ever forget. Being loud may get attention, Judy said calmly, but character is what earns respect. And today you showed everyone exactly which one you lack. The silence afterward felt crushing. Karen looked like she wanted to disappear. And honestly, everyone watching knew the fight was over. All that remained now was the humiliation of walking away after losing it publicly. The silence after Judge Judy's final words felt heavier than anything else that had happened inside the courtroom that day. Karen sat motionless for a few seconds, staring forward as though she was trying to process how quickly everything had fallen apart. Only minutes earlier, she had walked in believing she controlled the energy of the room. Now she couldn't even look anyone in the eye. The audience watched quietly as the reality finally settled over her. The confidence she once carried so proudly had completely collapsed under the weight of Judy's calm precision. Karen's insults, her attitude, her intimidation tactics, none of it had worked. And that was the most humiliating part of all. Judge Judy never lost control for even a second. She never screamed, never panicked, never let anger overpower discipline. Instead, she used timing, restraint, and intelligence to dismantle Karen piece by piece in front of everyone watching. Karen shifted awkwardly in her chair, clearly desperate to escape the room now. Her earlier arrogance had vanished completely. The woman who once smirked while insulting Judge Judy now looked emotionally exhausted, trapped under the pressure of public humiliation. The gallery remained focused on her. Some people whispered quietly. Others shook their heads in disbelief. But nobody was laughing with Karen anymore. Now the laughter was directed at the very behavior she once used to dominate other people. That reversal was devastating. For years, Karen had likely survived arguments by overwhelming others emotionally. She weaponized volume, insults, and confrontation because most people eventually backed down just to avoid the chaos. But Judge Judy refused to retreat. And because Judy stood firm, Karen's entire strategy collapsed publicly. Judge Judy slowly organized the papers in front of her, completely composed, while Karen sat there struggling to recover emotionally. Then Judy looked up one final time. "You know," she said calmly, "people reveal their character most clearly when they don't get their way." The room became quiet again instantly. "And today," Judy continued, "you revealed far more about yourself than you ever revealed about me." Karen swallowed hard. The sentence hit brutally because it was undeniable. Karen entered the courtroom trying to embarrass Judge Judy personally. Instead, she exposed her own lack of discipline, maturity, and self-control to everyone watching. Judge Judy leaned back slightly, still maintaining complete authority over the room. "Respect is not created through intimidation," Judy said firmly. "It's earned through behavior. And if you spend your life bullying people simply because you think you can, eventually you run into someone who refuses to be bullied." Karen looked completely defeated now. Even her posture had changed. The loud, aggressive energy she entered with was gone entirely. Her shoulders slumped slightly as she stared toward the floor, realizing there was nothing left to argue anymore. The fight had ended long ago. She simply hadn't realized it until now. Judge Judy's voice softened slightly, but the authority behind it remained sharp. "The problem with arrogance," Judy explained, "is that it convinces people they are stronger than they really are." Karen stayed silent. "And when arrogance finally collides with accountability," Judy continued, "the collapse is usually painful to watch." That line sealed the entire moment. The audience reacted quietly, almost thoughtfully now. Because Judy's words no longer sounded like insults. They sounded like truth. Karen slowly stood from her chair, clearly wanting nothing more than to leave the courtroom as quickly as possible. But even that moment carried humiliation with it. The same woman who walked in loudly demanding attention now avoided looking at anyone while heading toward the exit. Her footsteps sounded heavier than before. The courtroom watched silently as she moved toward the doors. And in that moment, everyone understood exactly what had happened. Karen didn't lose because Judge Judy insulted her harder. She lost because Judge Judy exposed the weakness hiding underneath all the noise. That was the real destruction. Karen's entire image depended on appearing intimidating. But once Judy removed the illusion, there was nothing left underneath except insecurity, anger, and embarrassment. As the courtroom doors closed behind Karen, a quiet wave of conversation spread through the room again. People weren't talking about the insult anymore. They were talking about Judy's response, because once again, Judge Judy had reminded everyone why she remained such a powerful figure for decades. Not because she shouted louder than everyone else, but because she understood exactly how to dismantle arrogance without ever surrendering control. That was her true strength. And moments like this were why millions continued watching her year after year. Judge Judy didn't simply defeat difficult people. She turned their own behavior into the evidence that destroyed them. Karen thought she had entered the courtroom with power, but true power was never sitting on her side of the room. It was sitting calmly behind the bench, wearing glasses, holding composure, and waiting patiently for the perfect moment to strike. And when that strike finally came, it left Karen completely humiliated in front of the entire courtroom. That was the lesson everyone watching would remember long after the hearing ended. Arrogance may demand attention, but discipline always wins in the end.